Hi guys, and happy Pride Month. This is the second one I get to celebrate here on my channel. Last year, for my Pride Month special, I did a little deep dive into the gay icon Earring Magic Kin, and it's still one of my favorite videos I've ever done. This year, however, I'm increasing my scope a little. I want to talk about the representation of the LGBT community in fashion dolls, just in general. Whereas Earring Magic Kin was more of a complete accident, I want to go into the more purposeful depictions, a brief history, if you will, of LGBT fashion dolls. Now, before going deeper into this, I do want to say that there is a fairly broad category that I won't really be going into, and that's dolls based on real-life people or pre-existing characters that are LGBT, mostly just in the interest of time. I don't want to go in depth into every Harley Quinn doll or Elton John or Dumbledore, I guess, because like I said, this is more about purposeful depictions. And I'm also inevitably going to miss one or two dolls that I likely could have talked about, but like I said, brief. So, fashion dolls have always kind of been intrinsically linked to the LGBT community, and if you're not too familiar with fashion dolls, you probably think that statement sounds pretty bold. But just think about how inseparable the fashion industry is with the LGBT community, specifically with gay and gender non-conforming men. It's just natural that fashion dolls follow suit. A lot of the industry's most iconic figures are gay men. The creator of Bratz, the creator of Monster High, many of Barbie's most memorable designers, and one of the most notable designers working for Barbie today, all are gay men. And yet, despite this, fashion dolls historically have been one of the most difficult avenues to introduce LGBT representation into. And a big reason for this is, of course, that they're mostly considered children's products. And unfortunately, a significant portion of the population still thinks that gay people simply existing and breathing is too much for children to handle. But even as other franchises make huge strides in LGBT representation in books or animation, for example, fashion dolls just always seem to be a few steps behind, though things are getting better ever so slowly. You'll notice that overwhelmingly a lot of these LGBT dolls are for adults, and I do mean like really for adults, but I guess I'm getting just a little bit ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and get into it, starting at the beginning. The first notable gay fashion doll is from 1977, the aptly named Gay Bob. The doll was created by Harvey Rosenberg, a former advertising executive. Like I said, he was an adult's product, initially intended as sort of a gag gift. It's very important to note here that Rosenberg did not identify as gay, and fitted Gay Bob with a particular sense of humor. The doll wore one earring, he came packaged in a box made to resemble a closet, he had a catalog full of exorbitantly expensive clothes such as army uniforms and leather biker outfits that couldn't actually be bought, and most notably, he was anatomically correct, which obviously I cannot show images of, so just trust me. Or look them up yourself, as long as you're like of an appropriate age and not at school or work or anything, but moving on. Despite Gay Bob very ostensibly being a joke, he was also quite sincere on a few levels too. After being asked why he would pour so much money into Gay Bob's production, estimated around $10,000, Rosenberg stated, quote, "We had something to learn from the gay movement, just like we did from the Black civil rights movement and the women's movement, and that is having the courage to stand up and say, I have a right to be what I am." Likewise, Gay Bob also garnered some significant backlash. Although he was very clearly exclusively an adult's product, a lot of anti-gay organizations saw Gay Bob as some kind of attempt to corrupt the youth and destroy the morals of the next generation. According to an article in Atlas Obscura by Michael Waters, the lobby group Protect America's Children made the following statement concerning Gay Bob. Quote, "It's another evidence of the desperation the homosexual campaign has reached in its effort to put homosexual lifestyle, which is a death style, across to the American people." Despite the controversy, Gay Bob resonated with the community and those sympathetic to the movement. According to Rosenberg, he sold several thousand dolls within the first few months of Gay Bob's launch, and Gay Bob was the cover story of a number of different gay magazines and publications, For a short while, Gay Bob became the face of the public's slowly changing attitude toward the quote-unquote gay lifestyle. Moving on to 1997 with the introduction of Billy. Very similar to Gay Bob, Billy also marketed himself as the first gay doll, though obviously that honor actually belongs to Bob. Also like Bob, Billy was also anatomically correct, so yeah, there's that. Billy was created by artists John McKitterick and Juan Andres, originally as a limited run of 1,200 dolls sold to raise money for an AIDS charity. The venture was a massive success, and McKitterick decided to mass market the Billy dolls to meet demands. He was released with a range of cheeky, stereotypical gay outfits, and the line also expanded to feature 2 other characters, a boyfriend for Billy named Carlos, and a friend of the couple named Tyson. More outfits and sets would be produced, one of them actually resulting in a bit of legal trouble. One of Billy's outfits was a BPS uniform, clearly meant to represent the uniform of the United Parcel Service. Apparently UPS uniforms were like highly fetishized around this time. But anyways, this landed a cease and desist from UPS. Thomas Curtin, trademark counsel for UPS, wrote in a letter directed to the creators of Billy dolls, quote, "No matter how humorous your company may consider the noxious BPS Billy doll, that product creates an undesirable, unwholesome, and unsavory association with our clients' well-known trademarks, the UPS logo and brown uniform." Billy would become a central part of several other charity events and parties and auctions to benefit other charities, mainly focusing on the AIDS crisis or the gay rights movement. And because he was more central to the LGBT community, I can't find as much evidence of there being a significant backlash towards him. But he did gain a lot of mainstream media attention, appearing in publications like the New York Times, The Guardian, Washington Examiner, and many others. In a quote published by the Chicago Tribune in 1997, McKitterick says, quote, "We are trying to put a little humor in the gay debate. Billy is out and proud, and what he says to people is that diversity should be accepted and celebrated." In 1999, McKitterick mentioned the possibility of introducing a female doll to the lineup, but this unfortunately doesn't seem to have happened. A few years later, in 2004, a doll line would be launched by Stephanie Perdomo after the completion of her master's thesis at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, an effort to create the world's first openly lesbian doll. They are named something that I personally cannot say out loud, but these were intended to be a commentary on the underrepresentation of lesbians in media, as well as an effort to represent alternative lifestyles, particularly those of butch lesbians. 3 dolls were available at launch, named Diesel, Bobby Rockabilly, and Doc Holliday. These were also very ostensibly aimed at adults, as evidenced by the accessories that you could purchase separately, which included a whole host of sex toys. These don't seem to have made quite as much of an impact in the media as Billy or Bob, so unfortunately there isn't a lot of information on them that hasn't been buried under paywalls or just simply lost to time. So, something I haven't really talked about up to this point but is important to mention is that dolls like Gay Bob, Billy, and Stephanie Perdomo's line aren't fashion dolls for a fashion doll audience. They're art pieces, they're protests, they're social commentaries, but they aren't sold or bought intended as traditional fashion dolls. And they're no less important or significant to history for that, but there is a very clear distinction between LGBT representation in these versus LGBT representation from, fashion dolls meant to be fashion dolls. And when it comes to dolls made for children, depictions of LGBT people are typically more subtle, intentionally easy to miss, or just ambiguous, often kept exclusively to auxiliary media, and not mentioned at all in marketing or materials for the dolls themselves. A good example of this comes from one of my personal favorites, In The Holograms. Okay, so this is where our timeline is going to start jumping around a bit, so bear with me. In The Holograms was a doll line from the 80s, and it really is the most 80s thing you can imagine. I won't go into the whole storyline. If you're not familiar, you really just need to know the concept revolved around bands and their music, and it had an accompanying animated series made to promote the dolls. In 1987, the series aired the episode The Bands Break Up. It featured the characters Kimber, the main character's younger sister and bandmate, and Stormer, a member of the rival band, the Misfits. They both left their respective groups and formed their own duo, as well as a friendship with some very intense subtext.
At least your group cares about you. I care about you, Stormer. Friends? Friends? Forever. Against the world. Gifts! But then I realized you gave me something nobody else ever did. Sincere friendship. And that's worth more than anything the Misfits ever gave me. Move it! It was fun, Stormer. It was more than fun, Kimber. Oh, we learned a lot about each other. Yeah, and a little bit about life. I'm okay.
When the two rival bands break into a song about how the two are bad influences on each other, it includes the line, "She'll break your heart in two." It's also revealed that Stormer keeps a framed photo of Kimber next to her bed that she often gazes at lovingly in the mornings. Their relationship didn't quite reach the level of following that, say, Xena and Gabrielle did, but the two became a very popular pair in the fandom. I can't say for sure if implying something romantic here was intentional, but it's honestly quite difficult to argue that it wasn't. The show is full of positive friendships and platonic relationships between women, but none of them are depicted quite like this, if that makes sense. And in any case, all of it would culminate in IDW Comics' 2015 reboot of In The Holograms, cementing Kimber and Stormer as a canon couple, with the storyline focusing pretty heavily on their romantic relationship. And although this might not apply to the doll line from the 80s, well, I like to think it retroactively does. Kimber and Stormer are officially LGBT dolls now. Jumping forward a bit now to 2010. The company Tonner, an established doll company known mainly for adult collectible dolls, introduced a new character into their line, Cammy and John, named Andy Mills. Tonner is also known for introducing fairly elaborate storylines and backstories for the dolls, so Andy was characterized as a successful event planner living in New York and, well, a gay man. Cammy and John was not Tonner's most successful or memorable product line, I don't think, so Andy doesn't really come to people's minds when they think of historically significant gay dolls. But I think he deserves recognition for what seems to be the first openly gay fashion doll that was made very straightforwardly to be a fashion doll. But also in 2010, Mattel launched soon-to-be global phenomenon Monster High. And although no LGBT characters were introduced during its run, fans took notice of the fact that one of the main characters, Claudine Wolfe, was never given a romantic storyline in the same way most of the other main characters were. Many took this as Mattel perhaps hinting that she was a lesbian, but this remained purely in headcanons, and in the 2016 reboot, she was actually given a male love interest. However, in 2020, Monster High's creator, Garrett Sander, in an Instagram Q&A, touched on the topic of LGBT characters in the franchise. Sander, being gay himself, wanted to introduce a gay character, but each time was denied by higher-ups at Mattel. Two specific characters he mentioned were Nathan Rott and Kieran Valentine. And although he wasn't allowed to make either of them canonically LGBT, Sander did admit that he made sure to put as many hints as he could into their diaries and other materials. When asked about Claudine's sexuality, Sander said that it was never their intention to make Claudine a lesbian. Rather, they just wanted a character who wasn't quite as boy-crazy as the others. However, he recognized how much traction the headcanon had gotten and fully embraced the idea. Although he doesn't currently work on Monster High anymore, he more or less retroactively declared Claudine as canonically lesbian. Other characters brought up in the Q&A were Kiyomi Haunterly, who might have been hinted to have a crush on another female character, Gilda Goldstag, who some fans saw as transgender, and Colin Mary, who Sanders said he could see as being bisexual or pansexual. But now taking a few steps over to Monster High's sister franchise, Ever After High. The plot of this one is a lot more complex than Monster High and a little difficult to explain if you're not familiar with it, but also, the movies are really great, go watch them. But basically, it involves the children of fairy tale characters who are destined to relive their parents' stories and how they either accept this or rebel against it. One of the main characters is Apple White, the daughter of Snow White, and is basically one of the most important characters in the entire storyline. She spends most of the franchise believing that the prince destined to wake her up with a kiss is her classmate Daring Charming, though the two were not in an official romantic relationship. In the events of the 2016 film Dragon Games, Apple is forced to live through her destiny early when she eats a poisoned apple and is put into an enchanted sleep. Daring attempts to wake her up, but finds that he is unable to. Whenever Apple starts choking, however, another character leaps into action, Daring's sister, Darling Charming. She is the one who is successfully able to wake up Apple through mouth-to-mouth contact, obviously implying that Darling is her destined prince, or princess rather, her true love. There was a mostly mixed reception to this, with many believing that the scene was framed too ambiguously to be anything of substance. Many denied outright that it was meant to be romantic. Mattel never really released a clarification on this either. Many of the movie's staff did confirm that they framed the scene to be romantic, but most of these posts have since been deleted, so I won't repost them here out of respect, but you can find them if you look for them. Unfortunately, this storyline was never really resolved or addressed again. Neither Apple nor Darling had major roles in the following movie, Epic Winter, and Ever After High was fully cancelled shortly afterwards. Now, moving on, I do want to give a special mention to LOL OMG from MGA, because although they don't have a gay doll per se, they do have a lot of small references here and there that hint towards it. There's a doll that references drag queen RuPaul. The doll Busy BB features packaging that had a license plate that reads Equal Love. The male doll Cool Lev sports a pink, blue, and white color scheme and a jacket with the pronoun he on it. Another that's not exactly canon involves another MGA franchise, Rainbow High. Early on, fans noticed that two female characters, Jade Hunter and Bella Parker, had a special connection in the accompanying webisodes. Although Rainbow High's Instagram teased the couple several times and hinted at the development of a romance between the two, at the time of recording this, that has still yet to be fully realized. Still, the two remain a fan favorite couple. In 2019, another adult collectible doll company, Integrity Toys, launched a special 2-doll wedding set titled Love is Love, featuring two male characters, Cabot Clark and Milo Montez. It's not the first time Integrity released dolls characterized as gay. They actually hinted at it with a few of their other characters, namely Pierre DeVries and Francisco Leon, but these were the first packaged as a couple. Later, in 2021, Integrity would release a new character, Alejandra Luna, in their New Face line, noted to be the first transgender character in the lineup. Circling back to Mattel again, in 2019, they launched a new product line called Creatable World. This one did not come with dolls that had any kind of backstory or storyline, but rather were completely blank slates. They came with wigs that could give them longer hair if desired, bodies that were undefined, and a mix of traditionally masculine, feminine, and neutral clothing. As such, Mattel called Creatable World the world's first gender-neutral doll. Creatable World was not only a product of the public's changing views towards trans or gender non-conforming individuals, but also the changing landscape of the relationship between toys and gender. And I do think Creatable World had the potential to do some good, and maybe it did, but Mattel loves to launch things with these huge back-padding media campaigns that praise how progressive they are, and Creatable World was no exception. As expected, due to all this media attention, the brand garnered a pretty significant backlash. They became known more or less as the trans doll, and became the subject of a pretty intense political battle. Some lauded what could be a useful tool for children to learn about gender variance. Others said that Mattel was unnecessarily pushing a political agenda. And unfortunately, since the dolls didn't really have much to offer outside this initial gender-neutral concept, they didn't have a lot of staying power, and the line slowly drifted into cancellation pretty much immediately following its launch. And that brings us more or less to the most recent example of an LGBT doll, or dolls, rather. The release of the Bratz Pride 2-pack featuring the characters Roxy and Nevra. Now, these characters were actually confirmed to be in a romantic relationship back in 2020 with a Pride Month post by the Bratz official Twitter. This coming out post also labeled Nevra specifically as bisexual and Roxy as a lesbian. And it's important to note here that although Bratz used to be a children's brand, their latest incarnation is very much focused on adult collector dolls. Roxy and Nevra are both characters that have been in the Bratz franchise for a long time. Nevra was introduced in 2003 and Roxy in 2004. Since their coming out post, they've been featured as recurring characters in the Bratz revival as well, appearing both in their social media and in the Total Fashion Makeover mobile game. Then, in 2022, it was announced that the two would appear together in a Pride Celebration 2-pack as a collaboration with the designer Jimmy Paul. The two appear decked out in full Pride gear, along with pins that might hint towards other identities for them. Roxy wearing a transgender Pride pin, and Nevra wearing ones featuring the intersex flag, non-binary flag, and gender fluid flag. And here we are now. Hopefully, by the time Pride Month rolls around next year, this video will already be sorely outdated, and we'll have plenty of other gay dolls to talk about. The landscape of LGBT representation in fashion dolls obviously leaves a little more to be desired, but there's still a lot that are not only important pieces of fashion doll history, but LGBT history as well. Our world is changing, constantly. And although we've enjoyed a lot of progress, it's become apparent that we still have a long way to go. And obviously, gay fashion dolls aren't the end-all be-all of the gay rights movement, but hey, I'm gay, I love fashion dolls, and I think I deserve them. But if you think there was one gay doll here and there that you think I missed, be sure to let me know. Tell me what your favorite LGBT doll is. Go watch the Ever After High movies if you haven't yet. And when you're done, be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll content. Thank you.